So this campaign really is to support the global care reform movement, to listen to the voices of care leavers around the world who are calling for a change to the practice of volunteering in orphanages, and also to support just the growing movement to keep children in families and in their communities. There's a huge amount of support that goes from Ireland to orphanages overseas, and it's actually a bottleneck stopping the global care reform movement, which is progressively closing down institutions and keeping children with their families and in their communities. So even a well-run, well-resourced orphanage with staff that care about the children cannot replace the care and stability of family-based care in the community. Now, we're all very well aware of Ireland's own history of orphanages and residential care institutions for children, and one that's featured high levels of systematic abuse and neglect. The Commission of Investigation into the Mother and Baby Homes found high levels of deprivation, physical and emotional abuse, and rampant infant mortality rates. And the testimony of survivors contained in reports speak of the long-term negative impacts for those who have been brought up and have lived in these institutions.
So to date we have 35 civil society organisations, unions, professional associations, those working in human rights and international development sectors who have formally endorsed our campaign, also health and education sectors. So it is an issue that we are not alone in speaking about. Unfortunately, volunteering in orphanages abroad is doubly harmful. In the first place, there's well-established research that institutional care has very negative long-term life impacts for children. They struggle with mental health issues, they struggle with attachment disorders, they struggle to find their way in the world, and they are considerably more likely to end up in sex work, incarcerated, or death by suicide. The volunteering in orphanages gives a financial boost or support to that whole, what's often referred to as an orphanage industry, and it may interest people to know that of the 5.4 million children worldwide that are in these institutions, 8 out of 10 of them have at least one living parent. So they are erroneously referred to as orphans. But the volunteering and the donations and the funds raised by school visits, by volunteers in those places prop that up. But the volunteering is actually also harmful in and of itself, creates these fake attachments with children who are very traumatized, who don't get one-on-one attention, and for whom then a volunteer becomes an important person who then leaves. Also, the volunteers are usually not trained to deal with traumatized children, and often they're lacking the sort of safeguards that we might expect, so that it allows for the possibility of predatory people to have access to these traumatized children. It disrupts their education as well.
Unfortunately, in Uganda, the reality for us is our Child Protection Department is a very busy department, and they deal with issues such as children who've been left, or newborns who've been left on the side of the road. And then through those networks who we work with, local community leaders out into the community, we work compassionately to find that child's parent. And when we do, generally speaking, there is an underlying issue driving poverty, and that could be, in some instances, we are dealing with children, essentially, mothers who have given birth to a child, they don't know what to do, they have no income, they've nowhere to turn, so they leave the child on the side of the road to take care of themselves.
As an organisation, Nurture Africa works in community development in Uganda, so we have a holistic family-centred model that provides access to healthcare, education, and then we provide supports across community in terms of income generation, nutrition, and a pretty comprehensive child protection programme. So our work there is very much focused on preventing children from entering orphanages rather than the removal of children or the deinstitutionalisation from orphanages. There is clearly a growing support for this movement and care reform, and it's really important that we maintain, obviously built up a bit of momentum, and it's really important that we maintain that now to educate as many people as possible. The ceasing of volunteering in orphanages is incredibly important. We need to educate ourselves in terms of what that means and how we are essentially maintaining the status quo that currently exists. And then in terms of that community-based care, that from government level really, that we're supporting from the very top in terms of that community-based care that we need to provide within the communities that we work in to ensure that children can live in their communities within their family home.
My name is Stephen, and I grew up in care. I spent almost 15 years of my childhood in a children's home here in Nairobi, Kenya, an environment separated from the rest of the community where we were only allowed to visit the community about 3 to 5 times a year. separated from the communities by high concrete walls and from families and other relationships. There are times I felt like we were like animals in parks or cages. We were taken to visit animal parks. Those days made me think more about how it wasn't so different with the orphanage. Volunteers coming and going, to be viewed and to be experienced, and often not allowed to interact a lot with them. We were prepared to sing and dance for them, and we had no choice. We even had no voice. We were told the experiences during these visits would actually determine if they would come back again, and also determine how much donations they would give. Today, I work with Open Homes for Children. We aim to spearhead a growing movement of organizations supporting children to leave orphanages and to be reunited with their families or join new families. At the same time, we establish the services that are needed to support vulnerable families to stay together and to stop children entering orphanages in the first place.
As I said inside, I would never have even imagined that people volunteering, because I've seen my own nieces, nephews, friends going doing it, the effects that it could have. And I suppose it's just a different way of helping, but having a better outcome for people that are being institutionalised in these orphanages out in foreign countries.
Some of us have very bad experiences of what it was like being in an orphanage and being institutionalised, and the way it led to utter abuse of people. It should be more family orientated than dumped into these institutional orphanages. Far better to support the families, and in that way they would never be stigmatised and have a better identity of themselves.
One of the things I think we found over time is that this is a difficult issue to broach. It's sensitive, which is why educational approaches often work better. But also I think it's an issue that needs political leadership. I don't think it's the kind of issue that there's going to be a groundswell of support necessarily from the public, even though they're becoming better informed, hopefully now. I think it's an issue where government and maybe pressed by opposition can start to set a standard. We heard about something like the foreign travel advice warning. Australia has this, the UK has this, the US has this. This isn't outlandish. A country from which many people volunteer and go abroad can be involved.
You can pledge not to volunteer in an orphanage, and you can do that on the comhlámh.org website. There's videos available to listen to the voices of care leavers talking about their lived experience and what their hopes are for their communities and their countries. And we would encourage people to consider diverting just their support from supporting institutional care to supporting organisations that are on the journey of reintegrating children back into family and community, working with families and communities to strengthen them and to keep vulnerable children at home.